Welcome everybody to a bit of a unusual stream here for the White Cloaks channel, and it's unusual because well, this is probably the first time we're ever going to have this opportunity. But I actually was able to go to an advanced screening of Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. So obviously, this is coming out for sort of the full viewing audience here, I believe on the 31st. I had an opportunity to see it this last weekend. I wanted to take a short opportunity here and say what I thought about the movie and whether or not I think you guys should see it. And this is my view, both as somebody who just watches TV shows and movies as a bit of a normie, if you will, but also as somebody who I would say is a maybe casual Dungeons and Dragons player. I've played a few campaigns, so like I've been around some of the lore, but not real deep on Dungeons and Dragons lore specifically. So it'll be a sort of a normie review of the movie, as well as a casual Dungeons and Dragons player review of the movie. So if that's something that interests you, I hope that you stay tuned. This should be hopefully a short video, and if you like this video, if you like some of the rest of our content, please consider liking, subscribing, sharing this video, all of that usual stuff. It helps us grow the channel. And with that, I will end the shameless plug and get into this. So Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. Um, to start off with, I will say that I actually would recommend this movie. So I would recommend you watching it. I think that it actually was a fun, enjoyable movie. I've likened it to probably like early phase one, phase two kind of MCU properties in terms of the enjoyability. It's not a great movie. If you are, if you're looking for Citizen Kane, you are not going to like this movie. This is not going to be the movie for you. But if you're looking for a good popcorn flick that you can take, your friends or girlfriend, spouse, children to go see, like I actually think, yeah, it fits right into that. It's got a good amount of action. It's got some good humor, and that's really where I would say maybe views early MCU, like the MCU humor that has gotten really stale in recent stuff, and the MCU movies have kind of gone downhill, right? But like if you think back to like your early MCU movies that had like a good balance of fun, action, adventure, and good sort of humor that kind of came in right at the right moments. There was a lot of that. So I can say I watched it with my wife. She has no real insight or knowledge into Dungeons and Dragons, but she does like fantasy. She laughed a lot. She really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed it as well as someone with a little more lore knowledge. So that's the top line, right? Is that if you're going into it with an open mind, yeah, I think that you should see this movie. I think it's going to do well at the box office. To be honest, I think that this is actually going to make probably a decent amount of money. So who knows? I guess there's my prediction. I think this movie will do well. I think it'll be well reviewed, and in a few weeks we'll be able to see whether or not I was right. I suppose. Going into it a little more deeply, I want to deal with the Dungeons and Dragons player kind of view, which is um, so again, as a casual Dungeons and Dragons viewer, I think that I enjoyed this movie. It didn't get every single piece of the lore right. I know that there's some complaints about that. I'm not going to go into that. Other people have done it better, but I do think that it gets enough of it right, that it's not going to be really distracting unless you really want to kind of nitpick the lore aspect of it. If you're going into it and you just you want to see something kind of in that world, and you're just along for kind of a fun ride, then some of the things, the notable ones being like travel times between areas and things like that, don't really make a whole lot of sense. So they kind of like fast travel, but they don't really explain that they're fast traveling. If that makes sense to you, but that's yeah, it didn't bother me. It didn't take me out of the experience. If it is something that'll take you out of the experience because you're really knowledgeable about the location and maps and where things are and stuff like that, then yeah, you might have issue with that. But in general, the thing that I want to give them the best credit for here is I think that they really captured the experience of a Dungeons and Dragons campaign. The movie was set up with a sort of intro framing device that seemed a little cheesy, kind of while you were maybe experiencing it, watching it the first little bit. But it actually, I think it did a lot of good work for the story. It kind of did what your dungeon master might do, where they kind of set up. the world that you're going to go and explore, and they give you sort of the background on, maybe some notable NPCs and things like that. It sets up a lot of that lore, sets up a lot of characters, and really lets you hit the ground running with the story. And it only takes a few minutes, so it's not actually terribly long, and it's interesting enough as it goes through. So I think actually it pays off. And then you meet the characters in the party and things like that, and the campaign starts, if you will, and it's centered around a couple core characters, namely the barbarian and the bard. Um, and the two of them are tight. They're sort of co-conspirators in this group, and they go around and they have a quest, and they have to find additional people to come help them along their way, and they form a party, right? So it's an experience that every Dungeons and Dragons player will know pretty well. And then they go out and they have an adventure, and the adventure has some side quests and some false turns and things like that. But it ends up getting to the end point. It has a resolution. They have a big showdown against sort of the boss, and then like I said, you have that resolution, and then the framing device actually comes back, and you feel like you completed a campaign. And along the way, the characters really meet their archetypes. Each character, I would like to say first, has a defined personality, has development and growth, has an actual arc that they are going through over the course of the story, which is pretty satisfying for each of the characters. They each grow, they each develop, each learn something, get better. You learn something and empathize with them as the audience. And in general, I think it's really satisfying. But I do want to say that they hit the archetypal notes for their class. So and maybe this is a time to kind of deal with some of the controversy around this. I'm not going to go crazy big into it, but I think the headline that everybody has probably seen if they're watching this video is stuff like this Bounding into Comics article that I'm looking at right now. Dungeons and Dragons Honor Amongst Thieves director admits to emasculating film's male leads, claims this was not done for woke reasons, but because it's funny and fun and fresh. Um, this caused a firestorm, to put it mildly, among fans and sort of media watchers. And I have to say that like it lands really flat when you watch the show. I if I think that they knew what they were saying, I can't understand why they would have said this based on the product that we get. I don't feel like the main characters, or the male characters rather, were emasculated in this movie. Um, so maybe I guess I would say that I'm not sure that the people who said that know what masculinity is. Might be the most charitable way to interpret that. So, for example, without going into spoilers, I don't want to go into spoilers. Um, the A couple of the male characters are a sorcerer and the bard, and there's sort of another kind of we'll say NPC, side character that you meet, and he helps out for a while and then leaves. Um, all three of them are the major kind of male characters. Um, One of the male characters is the traditional like sword swinging badass from the fantasy campaign. He's not one of the party members, but like he's there. The film does not, denigrate this guy. Like he is given a pretty good and respected position and view from the audience. So he's not emasculated. Far from it. In fact, super masculine, right? Um, then you have your party members, the sorcerer and the bard, and neither of them is masculine in the way that they, are beating people up and doing, that sort of stuff. But I would argue that's not really masculinity. Masculinity is, you know, embodying values and leadership and caring about your family and protecting the vulnerable, and those are the things that kind of make masculinity. And let's just say that the bard, I think, has all of that. He cares about his family. He cares about the party. He is the leader of the party. Yep, sometimes he is a little bit of a fool, um, but he also is the guy who leads, brings together, and makes the plans. And that's not emasculated. You don't have to swing a sword and punch people in the face to be masculine. And I think that us as players and us as watchers, we all know that. So it's weird to me that they said what they said about this movie. So I'll leave that there and just go back to the kind of party mechanic. So yeah, they have all these characters. The barbarian, not super smart, good heart, and likes to punch things to solve her problems. The bard, very clever. He's the face of the party, very charismatic. He does play his instrument a few times to varying levels of effect, and kind of does the spy thief sort of things. And like I said, he's the planner, he's the cunning guy who comes up with creative solutions to issues and has to boost morale and bring the party together. Classic bard. Then we have the sorcerer, who is pretty powerful, who does all sorts of interesting stuff, but doesn't have a whole lot of self confidence, and everything doesn't always go perfectly the way that he wants it to, but kind of gets there in the end. I don't want to talk too much about the sorcerer or the druid, either of them, because I think that I can't talk about it without getting too much into spoilers or potential spoilers. But let's just say the two of them, they approach magic from different directions, the druid and the sorcerer, and they have a little bit of a different outlook. Um, and I think that the outlooks align with their character classes and they embody them pretty well. Um, there's a paladin that we meet who is a lawful good paladin. I can put that simply, and they do a good job of selling that, and also the rest of the party's response to dealing with a lawful good paladin as somebody who plays a lawful good paladin in a in a campaign. Um, so overall, they nail the archetypes. They do it in a fun way. Um, and I think they do a pretty immersive world. The costumes are good. The sort of visuals are pretty good. And by good, I mean, can you nitpick them? Absolutely. Are they better than Rings of Power? Yes. So they're way better than Rings of Power. That's a low bar. So they do a lot of stuff right. The stuff that they get right, I think, is the player experience. Is really what I would like to say. So if you want to go watch a movie that I think is a pretty good approximation of like, hey, take your last fun playgroup campaign and like theater of the mind it and put it into a visual medium. I think they actually do it pretty well. I think that it's something that you can enjoy as a D&D player. And like I said earlier at the start of my video, you can definitely enjoy it as somebody who's not familiar with D&D, but who is just familiar with fantasy in general, who maybe likes the genre, or somebody who just wants to go and watch a fun, enjoyable popcorn movie. And so, with that, I think I'll leave it there. Again, thanks for listening. Like, subscribe, all that other stuff, and stay tuned. We're probably going to do a stream where we discuss this movie with some D&D players and we talk about the lore in more detail and maybe get into a little bit of spoiler territories. But for right now, I want to do a really short kind of video and just talk about what you might be able to expect and reasons why you might be able to enjoy the movie or not enjoy it. Like I said, if you are real deep into the lore and want the movie to be that, there are definitely some issues that have been discussed elsewhere, and I'm not gonna go into because, like I said, I'm not the lore expert who's qualified to go into them. But I think if you have at least a spoonful of charity in your viewing, I think that you will probably still enjoy a lot of this movie. So with that, thanks for watching, and everybody, walk in the light.